Okay, hello everyone. This is Ann Parker, your quick sketch teacher, and we're going to go over the lesson today on what to do for your homework, where we're going to be drawing a building and adding entourage, which are plants and people, to create a setting. This would have been the building we did for our field trip, and so this is the Timkin Museum of Art in Balboa Park, and I'll be sending you this image via email attachment, okay? So what you're going to do, if you print the image out, you can see we're standing here to the side of the building, and notice this line is angling down one direction and this line is angling down another direction. So we're seeing the building in 2-point. We're going to be modifying this view somewhat. So as you get your flimsy out, you'll be able to locate the vanishing points on your flimsy by simply taking the top of the building line here, starting at the corner, and following that line out. And then notice the edge of the planter, I'm going to follow that line out. And where those intersect, that's going to be a vanishing point. So here's, again, the corner of the building. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to follow this line out. I'm going to follow the depth line of the planter out to where they intersect, and that's your other vanishing point. So here we have your vanishing point right, and over here your vanishing point left. And again, connecting them will be your horizon line. Okay, so notice, again, the tops of the planters, that the depth lines or the bottom are all going to the right. So you can see those lines, and then the bottoms are going, or the front face is going to the left vanishing point. So notice, again, on this niche here, this opening that goes to the doorway, the depth of the niche is parallel to this side of the building. Notice how this side of the building, again, is going to the right vanishing point. So that means the depth of this niche is also going to go toward the right vanishing point. So if you think of it going off that direction, that's going to give you the depth of the niche. And then if you're coming from the left point, that'll give you the back wall where the door would be. So here would be the entrance door to the building right here. And then again, notice how these lines are going back toward the right point. Now we're going to simplify the front of the building by bringing lines out from the right point to create either just a simple walkway like you see here, and then this part could just end up being grass going around the building, or we can add in some stairs, which I'll show you in a minute. Notice also you can see this back building. So notice how the roof line of this building is parallel to the roof line of the back building. So that means the roof line of the front building here is going from the left point. So that means the back building will also be coming out from the left point. And again, so then again, if the depth of the building is going right, then the depth of this building will also be going to the right. So kind of fast forwarding the tape now, notice how as we block it out, we'll also be starting to include elements that we want to add for the entourage. So a couple things to note here. One is the building has these panels of travertine. So see how we've got these 4 even divisions of paneling on each section of the building. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 here, 1, 2, 3, 4 back here, okay? And then also notice that the back building has these reveals of bronze with travertine panels on either side. The top of the building has a band of bronze also going around it. You can see here. And then I've simplified the front of the building. It does have 2 columns coming down, but I've taken those off just to clean it up a little bit. And again, in the niche, I've simplified by adding taller glass doors, and you can see the big pulls here. And then there's these wooden panels over the doorway, okay? Now coming out, again, you're going to be coming from the right point over here, and see how I've got this flattened out here. And I added a landing with a few steps. So the depth line of the steps are going to be coming out from the right point, and then the long line of the steps are going to be coming out from the left point. So again, the depth line here comes from the right. We drop a vertical down, and then we come from the left to get the riser. So all of these sections here are the riser of the step. So this is the riser, and then this is the tread. So you can kind of get hopefully a better sense of riser, tread, riser, tread, riser, tread going up. Okay? Now, again, you do not have to put those in. If you would prefer to just have it be where this is a walkway going up to the building, that could, and this is lawn or some kind of planter area that's maybe just one step down, so you could just drop one vertical down like this and then come out from the left point. That could just be a simple raised planter box. So the steps are not required. I also modified this designs to put a reflecting pool right here. So I put a little sculpture and the pool of water. Again, that's not a required element. You can make all this planter or grass or plants. So notice I've got the tree here in the original image. The tree is blocking that corner of the building. So I simply shifted it over a little bit. This is another advantage of being able to add entourage, is that you can place those elements where you want to enhance the view. So I shifted it over so it's not blocking that key corner of the building, which shows the perspective going off in the two different directions, which helps the viewer's eye understand what's going on with the perspective. So we're going to be putting a tree here, and then one here in the foreground to give foreground, middle ground, and then some background trees. Notice how it's important to draw the background trees in not too large of a scale, because if I drew them very large, let's just give you an example right here, like this. Say I have a palm tree. Notice if it's too big, it looks like it's growing out of the roof of the building. So we want it to push back visually and look a smaller scale. Okay, then I also added a couple scale figures. So I've got these people coming up to the door. So you want to have at least one or two people in this view to give the building a sense of size or scale. So if I'm thinking of the height of the person, it's going to be about a third of the building. Okay, and then I've got some people down here as well. Now you wouldn't necessarily have to add 5 people like I've got, but you just definitely want to have, 1, 2, or 3 to give you that sense of scale. Remember what I also said about social grouping, so it's nice to have the people kind of grouped together. So in this case, we've got a couple going into the museum and then maybe a parent with 2 kids. And this is an art museum, so we wanted to look like, people are interacting with that space. Also, notice I just simplified the graphics. So when you have a public building, you want to have some kind of signage, as seen here, so that it's identifiable. If you have a building without any signage, it looks odd, like, is it a top secret government lab or something going on there? We don't know. So anyway, once you've got this blocked out, let's take the image out from underneath so you can see it better. Okay. Again, we've got, I'm going to see, excuse me, we've got this top line of the building going to the left vanishing point, and the depth lines again going to the right. So you can see all of these are fanning out from the left, all these long lines that are parallel to the front of the building, and all the depth lines to the building are raying out from the right. Okay, are we seeing that? So now let's say we've got our perspective checked and correct. We're going to now overlay and refine the sketch. So at this point, we will try to think about adding in again the texture lines. So notice how trying to make the lines look a little bit soft on the plants and break the line up a bit so it looks like they're not made from cardboard, that they have edges. And then adding in the different line weights and qualities. So we've got the bronze band up here and those reveals, so just added a double line there to create those thicknesses of the metal reveal within the stone panel. Notice also that you're wanting to add some background around the building, so does it feel like it's floating in the sky? We don't want the sky to go below the horizon line. If we do, then that makes it feel like the building's floating. So your first step then, after you've drawn it out, then you're going to take your N49 marker And using the fine tip, this, I went ahead and I used that to put in the darker bronze tones of the reveals all along the top band of the building, the side band, in the background building, and again in those reveals. So that was all with this darker marker, the N49. Now I'm also used that to put the marker on the palm trees in the background. Then I'm going to take the next marker, which is the N79, and again now I'm going to use the broad tip, and this is what I use to add in some value on the trunks of the tree. So let's take this out from underneath so you can see this more clearly. So we've got this coming in on the trunks of the tree to start to develop some value. Now also think about your light source. So I'm making it feel like the light's coming down from the left. So I added this wedge of shadow back in here where the niche or the overhang here is casting a shadow on the architecture. So that means that if the light's coming from this direction, notice how the sides of the building and the side of the planter are all that darker value. Now I'm also going to use this darker value to start to lay in some shadow underneath the plant or inside the planter box where it overlaps. So again, where the tree is sitting on the ground, or the shadow line underneath the people, or inside the plant here, or back in these areas. I'm going to add a little bit of that tone to start to develop the color. Now notice the treads, if the light against... Okay, now we're going to add some pencil effects to this. And so for this section, you want to have your white pencil sharpened, this sepia tone, and maybe a range of greens. So if you look at the original building once more, notice that these are travertine panels. So we don't want to leave them just stark white, because then that will look like, you know, something else, like a painted surface, and they're stone. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our sharp sepia tone pencil, especially on these foreground panels, we're just going to do a light vertical line close together. Oops, excuse me. To get a feeling of texture going on some of these panels. Now you can vary them, and the important thing is I'm pressing very, very lightly, and my pencil's very sharp. Okay, so I want to create this feeling of stone in these different panels. So I'm going to go ahead and lighten up, make sure that my texture starts to fade as it moves into the background. So I'll see the texture most clearly on these front panels, and then as I move further and further away from the front corner of the building, I'm using a lighter and lighter pressure. But always important to keep your tip sharp, because if you start to move into the background and your pencil gets dull, the lines are actually going to get thicker looking instead of thinner looking, which is not what we want. We want these to look lighter and finer as they move back. And you start to lose, remember that idea of texture perspective, that we start to lose perspective and texture as we go back. So I'm just going to throw a little of that texture into the water too, so that they relate to each other. Okay, and then now on this, I'm back here, I'm just going to even lighten up further to the point where I might just throw a few lines on there just to imply the texture and let the building unify without over-rendering it. I put in a little bit more pencil on this panel just to also darken the value, where I want the value on this side to be lighter. Why? Again, because this is facing the light source and this is side to the light. So now on this back building, doing the same thing. So I'm going to use a little bit firmer, more pronounced pressure on this panel and just kind of fade it as it moves into the shadowed area, so it seems less apparent. And not much at all on this side. Okay, so you're starting to see how that's reading a little bit more like stone instead of just a blank white surface. You can also do a few dots if you feel like you want to add more of that texture of the travertine. So remember, travertine is that raw stone has quite a bit of texture to it. Okay, so that's one area you can add some highlight. Now another way you can key up the focal point is by adding some reflected color into the glass. So there's two ways of going about this. The bolder way of doing it is just going for it with your marker and just putting a little bit of the light touch, a feeling of that person reflecting here into the glass, okay? And I'm going to, or you can, if that feels scary to do, you can do it with pencil, but I'm going to go ahead and use some white pencil then to outline the person back here into the glass. And I'll use just a little bit of touch of that blue to add it to the glass next to them, just kind of abstractly. So you're just getting a suggestion of these two people reflected into the glass of the door. Okay, so again, you can add some white pencil, or sometimes what I'll do is I'll take a fine point of the gray and just kind of do a light shape to imply those people walking up, where you can see their reflection in the glass. Another place to add pencil would be into the plants. So I could take some of the green pencil if I felt like I needed more texture on any plant and use that to pop some highlight, or take a darker green pencil to, again, just create a little bit more texture on the foreground plants. And then you can also use the same green to do some light shading to show some grass in the foreground. So notice how I don't even have any marker here. I'm just going to use the pencil by itself, because notice the paper has a tooth to it, meaning it's picking up a texture when I'm doing the shading with the pencil. And we can use this also for things like carpeting effects in a room, by just shading the pencil in here by itself. Now we don't want to overwork the pencil though, because the pencil's opaque and the markers are more translucent. So if we get too much pencil on here, that's going to have a negative or counterproductive effect, where it's starting to flatten the drawing instead of enhance it. Okay, so now we've got a soft wash of that pencil. And I'm going to create a little bit of flavoring into the bronze using the pencil as well. So first I want to make sure I get a nice sharp point on it. And take that same green and just add a little green into some of the bronze. For two reasons. One, I sent you the list about what flavoring is, which is reflected color. So it's going to enrich the marker color, but also harmonize the palette. So I'm just adding a little bit of that green into some of those bronze areas. And it doesn't have to be everywhere, but just enough so that it starts to use the green as a unifying color for the palette. Now speaking of neutralizing color, remember how I said you can add a secondary color here to neutralize? So I might go ahead and add, some of that sepia tone back in this area to create that shadow on the grass. And again, the sepia was used in the travertine. So it's another example of flavoring, taking the colors that are in the palette and using them around the palette to help enrich the color. So see how that starts to create a little shadowed effect on the ground right here. All right, so once you feel like you're finished, you want to take a step back and see if there's anything that looks like it needs more clarity, visual clarity. So one thing that's been bugging me is I have this tree right here, which is a bit obscuring the line of the building. So I'm just going to bring a vertical line right in here, so it feels like you can see the edge of the building a little more clearly, or ground it out here on the bottom. And then I'm also going to, on the back side, take one more coat of that marker to create the shadow a little bit more crisply. So I'm going to take this marker and just crisp up that cast shadow a bit. Now the reason I'm doing it on the back side is I have the pencil on the front. So I don't want to put the pencil or the marker through the pencil. And so just putting it on the back to keep them separate. So again, to review some of the points, you want to make sure that your glass feels dark and reflective. that you have these cast shadows on the building, that you've added texture with the pencil, and that you've added a range of green tones to create the landscape, as well as a few people to create your sense of scale and the fact that the public is using the building. So that's the end of lesson 8, and make sure, or assignment 8, and this will be something you can finish, and then you can take a photo of it and email it to me so I can see how you did. Good luck, and also email me if you have any questions. Have fun drawing. Daryl? Well, hopefully that went well.
Then you're all done?
Okay, to help you with your homework, I just wanted to do a little recap on drawing people. So if you'll recall, you're going to draw an oval. That will be the person's head. So you want it to be more of an oval shape instead of a round shape like this, okay? And once you've got the oval, you're going to draw marks equal in size. So I'm using that size of the oval and working my way down to do 7 slots altogether. So 1, the head, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, now I'm going to go from the bottom of the skull to the bottom of 4 for the length of the spine. I know that the waist is going to be here in the middle of 3, so I want the elbow to bend at the waist and the hands to come lower than the spine. Then the hips are going to overlap the spine, come down so that the knees bend around the middle of 6, and your feet would come out from there. So using that proportion, we want to think about drawing a generic person. So what you can do is just draw a head and then do a soft form for the hair. Okay, so it seems like this. Then start to round the shoulder. And then you can also even just bring in kind of a generic proportion shape. Especially on the homework for the building, you can keep the people fairly abstract like this. But as you go back in and fill in detail, you can come in here to bring in maybe the shape of a jacket, or the arm coming in to a pocket, or this arm holding, a bag of some sort that might be coming across their body. And see how all of a sudden you're starting to have a person take shape. So I'm going to bend the waist in here. So from here, I'm going to use a flesh tone for the face. Okay, maybe apply a little bit of that down at the hand. I'm going to use this sepia tone, which is the N957, for the hair. Remember, if the light's coming this way, I want to leave a little highlight on the top of the head. Okay, and now let's talk about the clothing. So let's say I wanted to give them a blue jacket. I'm going to put the glue on the shadow side of the shoulder first, and then bring it down the inside arm and the inside of this arm as well. And remember that idea of 70-30, so you could do 70% color, 30% white, but notice how right now it's kind of 50-50, which isn't as effective, which makes the viewer more confused. I'm not sure how to complete the shape. So now I'm going to take the blender through that blue just to soften it. And start to create a feeling of highlight, but with some soft edges or range of tone from dark to light blue and then the highlight to white. Remember, if you're going to use your blender, you want to clean out the tip back to clear before you put it away. So now I'm going to go ahead and do a gray pant by adding this darker gray and bringing that down the shadow side of the legs. So the same thing, if it feels like it's too much contrast, just simply take the blender and wipe that through so you get a range of value from dark to light. Okay, so then finally I'm going to take a deeper gray to be the messenger bag here, down here, or the briefcase or whatever kind of case that they're holding. All right, I'm going to leave the jacket or the blouse white, so that just implies the blouse and your eye connects it through. One thing you could do though to enhance it is to reinforce underneath the jacket like this, or underneath the bag. just to pop a few edges. Okay? So that's a quick recap of people. If you were having someone further in the background, recall that their eyes are going to align with this person in the foreground. So if I have a background person, there's that effect of tearing. Their legs are going to be up higher in your visual field, but their eyes will align with the person in the foreground. So again, the background person, you might mute the color or just give them a little dot of color depending on if they're in your focal point. Okay. And just a little dot of color here on the head so that your brain again kind of makes them into the person but without a lot of detail. All right, so there's your quick recap on drawing people. There's many examples of people in both the Rapid Viz book and the SRIS book, Sketching and Rendering Interior Spaces book, as well as your workbook. So you can practice those before you apply it to your Timkin homework. So again, we need to put those scale figures in to get the size of the building and the human use of the space. Okay, thank you and happy drawing.